Stop! Don't get in the car. A janitor's desperate shout froze the CEO in his tracks. Seconds later, a shocking truth was revealed that could have cost him his life, and what happened next changed everything. Stop! Don't get in the car. The words exploded through the cool night air like a thunderclap, cutting across the hum of engines and the chatter of employees leaving for the day. Heads snapped toward the sound. Shoes screeched against the pavement as people froze mid-step, and the sudden silence that followed was thick enough to make the hairs on the back of everyone's neck stand up. Marcus, the janitor whom most people barely noticed, came charging forward with surprising speed. His mop bucket had been abandoned near the doorway, water still dripping in a tiny trail behind him as he ran. His lungs burned, his heart hammered against his ribs, and yet his voice carried with the desperate urgency of a man who had nothing left to lose. All eyes turned to him, confusion flashing across the faces of office workers in neat suits and polished shoes. Why would the janitor yell like that? Why would he dare interrupt the CEO of the company, the man everyone else respected or feared, too much to even approach casually? But Marcus wasn't thinking about rank or rules or whether his job was at risk. He was thinking about instincts, about that gnawing feeling in his gut that screamed danger. For years, he had relied on those instincts to survive, not just for himself, but for his daughter, Lila. As a single father, his protective senses were sharper than ever. And right now, those same senses told him something was terribly, terribly wrong. Just moments earlier, while sweeping near the entrance, Marcus had noticed the sleek black car pull up. At first glance, it looked expensive and professional, the kind of car that seemed perfectly suited for a man like Mr. Reynolds. But Marcus's eyes, trained by years of observing details others overlooked, caught something off. The windows were tinted darker than company vehicles allowed. The driver's posture was stiff, not relaxed like the usual chauffeur. And when Marcus had tried to make eye contact, the man had quickly turned his face away, gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. He had seen that behavior before. Not in parking lots, but in the streets of his rough neighborhood, where danger often wore the mask of normalcy until the last second. And so, when Mr. Reynolds stepped outside, adjusting his tie and nodding politely to a few employees before heading straight toward the waiting car, Marcus's stomach twisted. He could almost feel Lila's face flash in his mind, her smile, her laughter, her trust in him. He couldn't let another family suffer if his instincts were right. So he had done the unthinkable. He had shouted, loudly, desperately, and now the entire company courtyard was frozen in shock. Mr. Reynolds stopped mid-stride, his expensive leather shoes inches from a curb. His brows furrowed, confusion clouding his sharp, calculating eyes. He turned slowly, looking back toward Marcus, as if trying to process why the janitor, of all people, had dared to raise his voice at him. "What did you say?" the CEO asked, his tone clipped, controlled, and almost irritated. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not like this. Marcus, panting from his sprint, pointed toward the car with a trembling hand. "That's not your driver. Don't get inside." The employees around them gasped, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Some looked nervously at the car, others at Marcus, unsure who to believe. The air was thick with tension, the kind of tension that presses down on your chest and refuses to let go. The driver, realizing he was the center of attention, shifted uncomfortably. His jaw tightened, and his eyes darted toward Mr. Reynolds before quickly flicking back to Marcus. The engine was still idling, the low rumble vibrating across the lot like a beast ready to pounce. Mr. Reynolds hesitated. He was a man of logic, not fear, but something about the janitor's raw urgency made him pause. Marcus's voice wasn't just loud. It was filled with something deeper. Conviction. The kind of conviction that doesn't come from guessing, but from knowing. The driver seemed to sense he was losing control of the situation. His hands clenched the wheel tighter, his breathing visibly shallow through the small crack of the lowered window. And then, in an instant, the mask slipped. His eyes narrowed, cold and calculating, and without a word, his foot slammed down on the accelerator. The car lurched forward with a deafening roar, tires screaming against the asphalt as smoke billowed in its wake. Employees screamed, scattering out of the way. Marcus leapt to the side, the force of the speeding car nearly knocking him off his feet. The black vehicle shot out of the lot, disappearing into the night like a predator retreating into the shadows. The silence that followed was deafening. People stood frozen, hearts pounding, their minds struggling to catch up with what had just happened. Mr. Reynolds turned back to Marcus, his face pale, the reality slowly dawning on him. If he had stepped inside that car, things could have ended very differently. And in that tense, breathless moment, the janitor nobody noticed had become the man everyone looked at. The CEO, startled, froze mid-step. For a man used to making split-second decisions worth millions of dollars, this hesitation was unusual. But the tone in Marcus's voice, sharp, urgent, desperate, made him pause. The driver, sensing suspicion, slowly lowered the tinted window. His face appeared just enough for people to see him. Tense jawline, shifty eyes, and an expression that didn't match the calm professionalism of a trusted chauffeur. Beads of sweat glistened on his temple despite the cool evening breeze. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Sir, please don't," Marcus shouted again, his voice cracking as he sprinted closer. "That's not your driver." The words cut through the air like a blade. Employees who had been gathering their bags stopped dead in their tracks, their conversations silenced by the unfolding drama. Some clutched their phones tighter. Others instinctively stepped back, not knowing whether to laugh it off or panic. For a brief second, the driver locked eyes with Marcus. And in that second, the mask of pretense slipped. His eyes narrowed, cold and calculating, like a predator caught before the strike. Then came the sudden roar of the engine. The car jolted forward violently. Tires screamed, leaving black streaks across the concrete. The smell of burning rubber filled the air as the vehicle shot forward, narrowly missing Marcus, who stumbled and nearly fell to the ground. Gasps and screams erupted all around. People scattered, shielding themselves as the black sedan swerved out of the parking lot and vanished into the night like a shadow. For several moments, the lot was filled only with the echo of screeching tires and the pounding of frightened hearts. Mr. Reynolds stood frozen, his briefcase dangling limply at his side, realization dawning slowly but heavily on his face. He turned toward Marcus, his sharp CEO exterior cracking just enough to reveal shock, something rare for a man known for his composure. Security guards rushed in, their radios buzzing as they scrambled to make sense of the chaos. "Lock down the exits. Call the police. Now," one barked, his voice tight with urgency. Employees whispered in panic, forming small clusters in the lot. Some looked at Marcus with wide eyes, murmuring, "He saved him. Did you see that?" Others shook their heads in disbelief. The janitor, the man they had passed by 100 times without notice, had just risked his life to stop something none of them had seen coming. Within minutes, the police arrived, sirens slicing through the night. Officers secured the area, questioning witnesses and checking surveillance cameras. The black car, they soon confirmed, wasn't registered to the company's security team. Instead, it matched the description of a vehicle used in a string of recent attempted kidnappings targeting wealthy executives. One officer, a stern-looking detective, turned to Mr. Reynolds and said gravely, "If you had gotten inside that car, sir, you would have been taken. There's no doubt. Your janitor here." He gestured toward Marcus. "Just save your life." The words rippled through the gathered employees like a shockwave. People gasped again, this time not in fear but in awe. The quiet janitor who scrubbed their floors and emptied their trash bins was now the hero of the night. Marcus, still catching his breath, stood awkwardly as attention flooded his way. He wasn't used to being the center of anything. Sweat clung to his forehead, his chest rose and fell heavily, but his eyes remained sharp, scanning the lot as though expecting danger to resurface at any second. Mr. Reynolds approached him slowly. For a man of power, he was rarely seen without a confident stride, but now his steps were measured, heavy with the weight of what might have happened. He placed a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder, his voice low but filled with sincerity. You just saved my life. I don't even know how to begin thanking you." Employees murmured louder, phones already buzzing as people texted loved ones about what had just happened. Rumors spread faster than wildfire inside the building. The janitor stopped a kidnapping. He saved the CEO. Did you hear? He risked his life. By the time the police finished their reports and the lot finally began to clear, one thing was certain. The company would never look at Marcus the same way again. He was no longer invisible. He was the man who had seen what no one else saw, the one who shouted when everyone else stayed silent. And though Marcus didn't say it out loud, deep down he knew one thing. He hadn't acted out of courage for recognition or reward. He had acted because his instincts told him to, because he couldn't bear the thought of staying quiet while someone walked into danger. That night, as the company buzzed with whispers and the CEO sat shaken in his office, the story of the janitor who yelled, "Don't get in the car," became more than gossip. It became a legend inside those walls, proof that sometimes heroes wear uniforms no one notices until the moment they save a life. Up until that night, Marcus had been invisible to most people. He was the janitor, the man who swept the hallways when everyone else had gone home, the man who quietly replaced trash bags and polished floors before the sun came up. Always polite, always hardworking, but rarely acknowledged. Most employees passed by him without a second glance. Some offered a quick nod or a forced smile, but many acted as if he were part of the background, like the walls or the furniture. To them, Marcus wasn't a person with a story. He was just the janitor. But Marcus carried a story heavier than most could imagine. Few knew his backstory. Marcus was a single father raising his 10-year-old daughter, Lila. She was the light of his life, his reason for pushing through exhaustion night after night. His wife, Clara, had passed away from a sudden illness years earlier, leaving him with the heavy responsibility of being both mom and dad. The grief had nearly broken him, but one look at Lila's tearful face reminded him that he couldn't give up. He had to be strong for her. Providing for her wasn't easy. Marcus had once dreamed of a career in engineering, but without a college degree and with bills piling up after Clara's hospital expenses, he had been forced to take the janitor job. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't the kind of work that earned respect, but it was steady. It paid just enough to keep a roof over their heads and food, however modest, on the table. Marcus worked long nights, cleaning offices, sometimes finishing just before dawn, then walking Lila to school before grabbing a couple of hours of sleep. He often skipped meals so she could eat better. He wore the same worn-out shoes for years, but he made sure she had a new pair every school year. When she wanted a birthday cake, Marcus took extra shifts, cleaning double the offices, just to see her face light up when he surprised her. Yet despite the hardships, Marcus never let bitterness take root in his heart. Instead, he taught Lila the values that guided his own life: kindness, courage, and honesty. He reminded her that no matter how tough things got, they must never look down on others. "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you can't see," he would tell her. On weekends, when other kids went to amusement parks, Marcus would take Lila to the library. They would sit together, reading books about heroes, explorers, and people who changed the world. She once asked him, "Daddy, do you think I could be a hero too?" He smiled and kissed her forehead. "You already are, sweetheart. Every time you're kind, every time you're brave, you're a hero." And it was those very qualities, kindness, courage, honesty, that lived within Marcus. They weren't just lessons he taught Lila. They were lessons he practiced himself. When he saw something wrong, he couldn't stay silent. When others ignored danger or pretended not to notice, Marcus spoke up. That night in the parking lot, when the sleek black car pulled up and his instincts screamed at him, those values took over. He didn't think about how people might laugh at him or how he might lose his job for shouting at the CEO. He thought only of doing what was right. He thought of the promise he silently made to his daughter, that he would always stand up, even when it was hard, even when no one else would. For years, Marcus had blended into the background, invisible in the eyes of those who thought status defined worth. But in that single moment, when his voice rose above the silence, he proved something powerful, Sometimes the people you notice the least are the ones who carry the greatest strength. That moment didn't just reveal Marcus to the company. It revealed him to himself. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a father, a protector, and a man whose courage came from love. And that courage, born of years of quiet sacrifice, was the reason the CEO was still alive. The next morning, Marcus was summoned to the CEO's office. When the call came, he almost thought it was a mistake. No janitor had ever been invited into that towering office on the top floor, and certainly not by Mr. Reynolds himself. As he rode the elevator up, Marcus's palms grew damp, his heart thumping faster with each floor passed. He adjusted his faded uniform nervously, thinking maybe he would get a polite thank you, maybe even a small reward, nothing more. When the door slid open, he was greeted by a receptionist who seemed just as surprised to see him. "Mr. Reynolds is expecting you," she said softly, guiding him toward the massive double doors. Marcus swallowed hard and stepped inside. The office was breathtaking. Walls of glass overlooking the city skyline, shelves lined with books and awards, and a sleek mahogany desk that seemed to glow under the morning light. Marcus fell out of place immediately. He'd spent years scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans in this building, but never had he imagined standing here. Mr. Reynolds rose from behind the desk. Unlike the night before, when he had been shaken and pale, today his composure had returned, but his eyes carried something new. "Respect. Marcus," he said warmly, motioning him to sit. "I've been thinking about what happened last night." Marcus sat on the edge of the chair, stiff and uncertain. He expected formal gratitude, perhaps even a handshake before being dismissed. But what Mr. Reynolds said next left him stunned. "You didn't just save my life last night. You reminded me of something important. People like you, who work hard quietly, are the backbone of this company. Without you, none of this," he gestured around the grand office, "would be possible." Marcus lowered his eyes, unsure how to respond. Compliments like that were foreign to him. Then came the shocking moment. Mr. Reynolds leaned forward and said firmly, "I want you to leave this janitor uniform behind. From today, you're joining our corporate team. We'll train you, mentor you, and give you the opportunity you deserve. And your daughter? We'll sponsor her education fully. Private schooling, all expenses covered." For a moment, Marcus thought he had misheard. His mind went blank, his throat tightened. "Sir, I don't know what to say," he stammered, his voice trembling. Tears welled in his eyes. For years, Marcus had been overlooked, dismissed as just a janitor. He had endured whispers in the hallways, polite nods that carried no real acknowledgement, and the feeling of being invisible. He had carried the weight of his daughter's future on his shoulders, wondering how he would ever give her the life she deserved. And now, in the span of a few words, everything had changed. Images of Lila filled his mind. Her wide smile when she read her favorite books, her hopeful eyes when she asked about college, her quiet worries when she saw him come home exhausted. The idea that she would finally get the education she deserved, without him having to sacrifice his health or dignity, was overwhelming. "Thank you," Marcus whispered hoarsely, his voice cracking. "You don't know what this means for me, for my daughter." Mr. Reynolds' expression softened. "I don't know, Marcus, because I grew up with a father who worked 3 jobs just to put food on the table. He never had anyone notice him, never had someone open a door for him. I don't want to make that mistake with you." For the first time in years, Marcus felt truly seen. Not as a janitor, not as an invisible worker, but as a man of worth. When he left the office, employees in the hallway turned to look at him. But this time, their eyes weren't dismissive or indifferent. They were filled with admiration and respect. Marcus walked with his head held a little higher, still in his janitor's uniform, but knowing it was the last time he would ever wear it. That evening, when he picked Lila up from school, he scooped her into his arms and told her the news. She looked at him with wide, sparkling eyes. "Daddy, does that mean I can go to the school with the big library?" she asked excitedly. Marcus laughed through his tears and kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby girl. You can go anywhere you dream." And as they walked home together, Marcus realized something profound. Last night, he had spoken up to save someone else's life. But in doing so, he had changed his own life and his daughter's future forever. Word spread quickly. Within days, Marcus became the talk of the entire company. Employees who had once walked past him without a second glance now greeted him with genuine smiles. Some stopped to shake his hand, others asked about his story, and a few even admitted they felt ashamed for never noticing him before. It was surreal for Marcus, who had spent years blending into the background, invisible to the very people who now treated him like an inspiration. But the most noticeable change came when he walked the halls in a suit for the first time. No longer in his janitor's uniform, Marcus wore a modest but sharp suit provided by the company. People whispered, "Is that Marcus?" as he passed, their voices tinged with awe. He wasn't just a man who cleaned their floors anymore. He was a symbol of courage, resilience, and the idea that anyone, no matter their role, could change the course of events with a single act of bravery. The buzz around Marcus grew so strong that Mr. Reynolds decided to make it official. At the next company assembly, held in the grand auditorium, he invited Marcus to share his story. It was a packed house. Hundreds of employees filled the seats, curious to hear from the man who had saved their CEO and, in doing so, reminded them of the power of speaking up. As Marcus walked onto the stage, a hush fell over the room. His steps were slow, steady, though inside he could feel his heart pounding against his chest. Public speaking wasn't something he had ever imagined doing. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, his eyes landed on one person in the front row, his daughter, Lila. Her small hands clutched the edge of her chair, her eyes wide with pride and admiration. That was all the strength he needed. Marcus took a deep breath and spoke humbly, his voice carrying a quiet power. "Don't ever underestimate the value of your voice. Last night, if I'd stayed quiet, things could have ended very differently. Sometimes, speaking up can save a life, or even change your own." He paused, scanning the audience, seeing nods of agreement and eyes glistening with emotion. Then he continued, "I wasn't thinking about being a hero. I wasn't thinking about recognition. I was just thinking about what was right. Too often, we convince ourselves that our voices don't matter, that someone else will step up. But what if no one else does? What if the only thing standing between danger and safety is your decision to speak?" The room was silent, every word sinking deep into the hearts of those listening. Then came the eruption of applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It was thunderous, emotional, filled with respect. People rose to their feet, cheering for the man who had once been invisible. Marcus stood there, humbled, his eyes misting as he bowed his head slightly in gratitude. In the front row, Lila's smile glowed brighter than the stage lights. She clapped with all her little strength, her eyes shimmering with tears of joy. For the first time, she saw her father not just as the man who made sacrifices for her, but as someone the world now recognized as extraordinary. To her, he had always been a hero. Now everyone else finally saw it too. From that day forward, Marcus's story became more than just a warning shouted in a parking lot. It became a lesson whispered in office corridors, shared at dinner tables, and remembered in meetings. Employees started treating one another with more respect, realizing that every role mattered, from the top executives to the janitors who worked late into the night. For Marcus, the change wasn't just in his career. It was in how he saw himself. He no longer carried the weight of invisibility. Instead, he carried pride, not the kind that comes from recognition, but the kind that comes from knowing he had lived true to his values. His courage had saved a life, changed his own, and set a powerful example for his daughter. And that, he knew, was the greatest reward of all. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.